So what really holds a democracy together? It's a much bigger question than you might think. See, it's not just about voting. It's about how we all participate, how we handle disagreements, and, maybe most importantly, how we fight for what's fair. Today, we're going to break down the essential ingredients for a healthy democracy. And believe it or not, our story starts with a surprising discovery inside an old scrapbook. All right, so picture this. We're in Johannesburg, South Africa. An 11-year-old girl named Maya is helping her mom clean up, and she stumbles upon this old scrapbook. As she's flipping through it, one photo just grabs her attention. It's a picture of a schoolboy, looks about 15, named Hector Peterson. When Maya asks her mom who he is, the answer is just chilling. He was shot by the police. Maya's reaction is exactly what yours or mine would be. Why, right? I mean, why would the police shoot a student? And that one simple, powerful question, well, it opens a door to a whole system of government that's honestly hard for many of us to even wrap our heads around. So, to understand why Hector was killed, we have to understand the world he was living in. We need to talk about the system that was in charge of South Africa at the time, apartheid. The word apartheid literally means apartness, and that's exactly what it was. It was a brutal system of laws built entirely on racial segregation. The government divided everyone into rigid categories: white, black, Indian, and colored, and by law, these groups were absolutely forbidden from mixing. And when I say separation, I mean it was absolute. This wasn't just some social norm. This was the law, and it was designed from the ground up to be deeply unequal. You had well-equipped ambulances for white people and poorly equipped ones for black people. The best farmland was saved for whites. And here's the kicker. Non-whites had zero voice in their own government. They weren't allowed to vote. Which brings us back to Hector. He and his classmates were being forced to learn Afrikaans in school, the language of the white minority government. But they wanted to learn in their own language, Zulu. So they joined a protest. They were protesting for their culture, for their very identity. And the police? They responded with just unbelievable force, beating the students and then firing live rounds into the crowd. One of those bullets killed Hector. Hector's death in 1976 became this incredibly powerful symbol for the struggle against apartheid. It helped spark a long, difficult fight, led by groups like the African National Congress and, of course, its leader, Nelson Mandela. It would take almost 20 more years of struggle, but finally, in 1994, the system fell. South Africa became a democracy, where every person was declared equal under the law. Now, this story, born from such a deep injustice, actually gives us the perfect roadmap. It shows us the fundamental things every single democracy needs to function. It shows us what's really at stake. So let's break down those key ingredients. Okay, first up, participation. You know, a democracy isn't a spectator sport. It actually falls apart if people don't get involved. So how exactly do people make their voices heard? Well, the most obvious way is through elections, right? We vote for people to represent us. But here's the real secret sauce behind the vote. Those leaders don't get to stay in power forever. They have fixed terms. If they want to get reelected, they have to answer to us, the people. That's the very heart of accountability. But look, just voting every few years, that's really just the starting line. Real meaningful participation is a constant thing. It's what happens in all the days, weeks, and months between the elections. Take a look at this. It's a simple letter to a newspaper from someone complaining that posters are making the city look bad. Now, it might seem like a small thing, but this is democracy in action. Participation means taking an interest, criticizing the government when you need to, and having an opinion on everything from big policies to local stuff like this. And, of course, sometimes participation has to get a lot louder. People form social movements, they hold rallies, they go on strike, they organize signature campaigns. These are all incredibly powerful ways to put pressure on a government and make sure it's actually listening. Okay, but what happens when all these participating people disagree? I mean, conflict is going to happen in any diverse society. It's just a fact of life. And that brings us to the second key ingredient of a healthy democracy. You need a way to resolve conflict peacefully. Think back to Hector's story. That conflict was met with violence because one group just used brute force to silence the other. A real democracy has to offer a different path. The government's job is to step in and help people work out their differences, using the rule of law, not violence. Let's look at a real-world example. So in India, there's a river called the Kaveri. It flows through two different states, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. And for decades, this one river has been the source of some major conflict. And the reason is simple. They both desperately need the water. So here's the problem. Karnataka is upstream, and it uses a dam to get water to its big cities. But Tamil Nadu, which is downstream, depends on that same water for its farms, and farming is the backbone of their economy. So Tamil Nadu only gets water if Karnataka decides to release it. You see the issue? Both states have totally legitimate, critical needs, and there just isn't enough water for both of them to have everything they want. And this is exactly where democratic government is so crucial. The central government's job is to step in as a kind of neutral referee. It has to find a fair compromise and work out a distribution of water that both states can live with. It's a system designed specifically to stop these kinds of disputes from boiling over into chaos or violence. All of this leads us to what is maybe the deepest, most foundational part of a democracy. It's not just about participating or resolving conflicts. There has to be a commitment to something bigger: equality and justice. It really comes down to this core idea. You just cannot have one without the other. If people aren't treated as equals, there can be no real justice. It's impossible. And this isn't a passive thing. A democratic government can't just put up a sign that says everyone is equal and then call it a day. It has a real responsibility to actively look for where society is unequal and then take actual steps to fix those historical and ongoing injustices. Here's a great example. In a lot of societies, there's been a historical bias that values boys more than girls. So to fight that injustice, a government might create what are called special provisions, like maybe lowering or even getting rid of school fees for girls. Now, the goal isn't to treat people differently just for the sake of it. The goal is to give them a tool to overcome a disadvantage that was already there and create a much more level playing field for everybody. So we have participation, we have conflict resolution, and we have this deep commitment to justice. But none of these things work, not one, without the final, most essential ingredient, and that's you. I love this quote because it really just nails it. The strength of any democracy depends completely on its citizens, on us, on people being alert, being interested, and being willing to hold their government accountable. At the end of the day, a government is only as democratic as its people demand it to be. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. The next time you're driving or walking and you see a protest happening on the street, don't just dismiss it as noise. Just for a second, pause and ask yourself, what is this about? Who are these people? What are they asking for? Because trying to understand their story, well, that's the very first step toward being the alert, engaged citizen that democracy absolutely depends on.